Hello, and welcome along to another episode of The Last 24, the channel that analyses and dissects the last known movements, actions, and events of those who have passed over to the other side. Whether it be famous celebrities, cultural icons, historical figures, or unfortunate victims of some of the most vicious and heinous crimes ever recorded, we aim to examine the reasons for each person's death and uncover any suspicious significance or conspiracy related to it. On today's episode, we will discuss the last hours and duties carried out by one of the most prominent and respected icons in British history, Queen Elizabeth II. For so many years, across 3 to 4 generations, the famous royal became known simply as the Queen, due to her lengthy reign as the figurehead of Great Britain and Commonwealth nations. She has been credited for her unwavering personality, commitment to her duties and the people of Britain, as well as her strong ties to world leaders, often being the reason for peacekeeping amongst global hostility. However, despite being well respected and adored by the public, her family life has constantly been in the spotlight, criticised and known for its scandals, fallout and conspiracies, especially those concerning Princess Diana and her grandson, Harry. To discuss the Queen's life in full would span across numerous episodes, so today we will focus on those last few hours before she would pass away, as well as the global response to her death. Join us as we celebrate and commemorate Queen Elizabeth II, here on The Last 24. Before we delve into the much publicised events that occurred before, during and after her death, let us first take a step back and get to know a little bit more of who the Queen was and what she represented. Elizabeth II, Queen of the United Kingdom and Commonwealth realms, died on the 8th of September 2022 at Balmoral Castle in Scotland at the age of 96. Her reign as Queen lasted a total of 70 years and 214 days, which makes her the longest serving of any British monarch in history. Elizabeth Alexandra Mary was born on the 21st of April 1926 and became Queen of the United Kingdom on February the 6th, 1952 at age 25, before officially being crowned on June the 2nd, 1953. She was the mother of Prince Charles as well as the grandmother of Princess William and Harry, and had married her distant cousin, Philip Mountbatten, a surname adopted from his mother's side, on November the 20th, 1947 at London's Westminster Abbey. Elizabeth first met Philip, who was the son of Prince Andrew of Greece, when she was 13 years old and fell in love with him at first sight. Having kept in touch over the years, both professionally and personally, they finally declared their love for each other and were married. Despite being polar opposites with regards to their personality, Elizabeth being very calm and reserved, whereas Philip being blunt and extremely confident, they were seemingly made for each other. Her father, King George, was initially uncertain about their friendship and eventual marriage due to the Mountbattens' lack of wealth. However, after many happy years together, Philip would pass away on the 9th of April 2021 at the grand age of 99. After her own death, just 1 year later, her son, Charles, immediately succeeded her as king. As mentioned, the role, responsibility and duties meant that Queen Elizabeth would travel the world, dedicating her life to maintain the monarchy and be the deciding factor in specific appointments, governing bodies, as well as upholding the standards of democracy within the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. Her last appointment was carried out just 2 days before her death. Pictured smiling and leaning on a walking stick, the Queen posed for photographers as she appointed her 15th and final British Prime Minister, Liz Truss, at Balmoral Castle. Despite looking frail and tired, many would be shocked and saddened at the pending news that would come just 24 hours later. After meeting with Truss, an announcement was made just after 6 p.m. on the 7th of September that the Queen was due to postpone a virtual Privy Council meeting on the advice of doctors. That evening, the new Prime Minister was informed that the Queen's condition was deteriorating as she was working on her energy statement, and so had to be prepared to announce her death to the nation. At 7 a.m. the next morning, the day of Queen Elizabeth's death, staff at Windsor Castle in London prepared for a helicopter to take the Prince of Wales from Dumfries House in Ayrshire, where he was staying that night, to his mother's bedside in Balmoral. It is reported that Charles arrived shortly before 10:30 a.m. His wife Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall, was driven from nearby Birkhall to join him. Anne, the Princess Royal, was already in Scotland at the time and was already with her. As word began to spread and rumours popped up across news networks and social media platforms, staff at Downing Street consulted Liz Truss and briefed her on the sad news that the inevitable was about to happen. According to the biography, Out of the Blue, a detailed expose of Truss's rise to power as well as her short-lived term as PM, she was still in the process of unpacking her clothes at number 10 Downing Street, and so aides were sent to her Greenwich home to pick up her black clothing and funeral wear. The timing couldn't have been worse for Truss, as she was also in the middle of a cabinet reshuffle, which is normally a stressful and time-consuming quest to appoint the best team to carry the country forward. As the news spread across the world that the Queen was poorly and that close relatives had been summoned to Scotland, news filtered into the House of Commons, where Truss had finished her opening statement and was listening to the comments of future Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer. The new Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Nadim Zahawi, entered the room and sat between Kwasi Kwarteng and Truss before handing her a note and immediately left the room. Labour's Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, was next to be informed of the grim news after being passed a note from outside the chambers. The note said, "The Queen is unwell and Keir needs to leave the chamber as soon as possible to be briefed." Rayner tried not to be too dramatic in handing the note to Starmer, but noticed that the Speaker of the House, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, permitted her to interrupt him. At 12:32 p.m, an official statement was released from Buckingham Palace. The Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended she remain under medical supervision. The Queen remains comfortable and at Balmoral. As one will probably know, when such statements are made, whether it be publicly or privately, when discussing the health of someone, it is generally considered that the worst is about to happen, or perhaps already occurred. By now, the news was so widespread that television channels began displaying the breaking news captions. BBC's Hugh Edwards changed into a black tie and announced the news to the general public that an evening call between Prime Minister Truss and French President Emmanuel Macron was cancelled. At 12:50, Buckingham Palace announced that Princes William, Andrew, Edward and Princess Sophie were now travelling to Scotland to be with the Queen at her bedside. An hour later, in a separate statement, Prince Harry and his wife Meghan Markle, known as the Sussexes, who were staying at Frogmore Cottage in Windsor and were due to attend an awards ceremony, announced that they too would be heading to Balmoral. 2 hours later, it was announced that the Princess of Wales, Kate Middleton, would remain at their new Windsor home with the Cambridges' 3 children, as they were still settling into the school that they had started just 3 days previously. Due to this change of plan, it was later reported that Meghan Markle would not be accompanying Harry either. Tensions had been at an all-time high between brothers Harry and William, especially in the months following the much publicised wedding between Harry and Meghan. Speculation concerning the couple's criticism of the royal way of life and animosity towards his relatives was rife, as was the fact that Harry did not accompany his brother and uncles on board the jet that left RAF Northolt at 2:40 p.m. on the day of his grandmother's death. There have been suggestions that the flight was originally intended to depart at 1:30 p.m. If that was the case, no further reason has been given for the delay. Harry ended up travelling by himself aboard a private jet that departed Luton Airport at approximately 5:30 p.m. Unfortunately, he would not make it in time to say goodbye to the Queen, as whilst his plane was still in the air, the announcement that she had indeed passed away would be broadcast to the nation at 6:30 p.m. With public attention on the transportation arrangements and hopes that the Queen would rally from her health scare, only those closest to her were actually informed that she had already died at 3:10 p.m. that afternoon. This would be declared on her death certificate, which would be made public at a later date. The cause of death was stated as old age by Dr. Douglas Glass. Her official apothecary in Scotland, Dr. Glass, later stated that he was concerned about the Queen's health for several months prior to her death. In Giles Brandreth's biography, Elizabeth, An Intimate Portrait, Glass declared that it was expected and we were quite aware of what was going to happen. It was also confirmed that her final moments in Balmoral were very peaceful and without pain, according to a memo by her private secretary. Sir Edward Young wrote she slipped away in her sleep when she died and wouldn't have been aware of anything. As William and the other royals landed at Aberdeen Airport at 3:50 p.m, 40 minutes after her death, they too would not make it in time to personally say goodbye to her. Prince William was spotted driving his relatives towards Balmoral, but they arrived at 5:06 p.m, an hour and 25 minutes before the news would be made public. Harry would subsequently land at Aberdeen Airport at 6:45 p.m. By this time, the world had been informed of the Queen's death, and so his late arrival caused a bit of a stir online. Buckingham Palace has since denied reports that Charles was unable to contact Harry ahead of the public announcement. A spokesperson for the King stated that the public was only informed after every family member had been informed. Harry would finally meet up with his family at Balmoral at 7:52 p.m. By then, Charles had released his own personal tribute to his mother, which read, "The death of my beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen, is a moment of the greatest sadness for me and all members of my family. We mourn profoundly the passing of a cherished sovereign and a much-loved mother. I know her loss will be deeply felt throughout the country, the realms and the Commonwealth, and by countless people around the world. During this period of mourning and change, my family and I will be comforted and sustained by our knowledge of the respect and deep affection in which the Queen was so widely held." After the announcement was official, Prime Minister Liz Truss spoke outside number 10 Downing Street at 7:07 p.m. to confirm the death of the Queen and the passing of the Second Elizabethan Age. As one can imagine, the response to such sad news was met with grief, respect, and global mourning for such a prominent and admired individual. Former Prime Minister Sir John Major said, "For 70 years Her Majesty the Queen devoted her life to the service of our nation and its well-being. In her public duties, she was selfless and wise, with a wonderful generosity of spirit. That is how she lived and how she led. For millions of people across the Commonwealth and the wider world, she embodied the heart and soul of our nation, and was admired and respected around the globe." Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon tweeted, "The death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth is a profoundly sad moment for the UK, Commonwealth and the world. Her life was one of extraordinary dedication and service. On behalf of the people of Scotland, I convey my deepest condolences to the King and the royal family." US President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden, as well as US Vice President Kamala Harris and Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff, released respective statements of condolences on Twitter following the Queen's death. President and First Lady Biden also visited the Embassy of the United Kingdom in Washington, where they met with British Ambassador Dame Karen Pierce and embassy staff, delivered flowers, and were the first to sign a condolence book that the embassy had opened. In it, he wrote, "The American people mourn today with people throughout the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. Elizabeth II defined an era. She led with enduring strength and dignity, devoting her whole life to serving her people. Jill and I will never forget meeting her and experiencing her warmth and kindness. She will forever be remembered." In the days following the announcement of Queen Elizabeth's death, plans were set in motion for Operation London Bridge, a funeral plan first devised in the 1960s, and Operation Unicorn, the plan for the Queen's death in Scotland. As the world reflected on the life of the Queen, her coffin lay at rest in St Giles's Cathedral in Edinburgh from the 12th to the 13th of September, after which it was flown to London, where it would lay in state in Westminster Hall from the 14th to the 19th of September. It is recorded that more than 30,000 people filed past the Queen's coffin in Edinburgh, and approximately 250,000 people queued to pay their respects to her in London, including many celebrities and famous faces. It was also announced that the United Kingdom would observe a national mourning period of 10 days. Elizabeth's state funeral service was eventually held on the 19th of September at Westminster Abbey, followed by a procession to Wellington Arch, featuring 3,000 military personnel and observed by approximately 1 million people in central London. From there, the state hearse transported the Queen's coffin to Windsor, which was followed by another procession through Windsor Great Park and a committal service at St George's Chapel at Windsor Castle. The Queen was interred later that evening with her husband, Prince Philip, in King George VI Memorial Chapel, in a private service attended only by her closest family. The end of the service included a sounding of Last Post and a 2-minute silence, which was concluded with the Reveille, God Save the King. From there, the Queen's personal piper, Pipe Major Paul Burns, who is said to have woke her each morning by playing the bagpipes outside her window, played the Gaelic bagpipe lament, Sleep, Dearie, Sleep, following the old tradition of walking away as a symbol of escorting the soul to heaven, which marked the end of the ceremony. Media coverage of the state funeral was one of the UK's most watched broadcasts of all time, and is estimated to have cost the government £162 million. And so this brings us to the end of another episode of The Last 24. We hope this shed some light on the last hours of Queen Elizabeth II. There is no doubt that the Queen had a monumental impact on the world stage. Her demeanour, attitude, and steadfast dedication to her country and its people was something to behold, cherish, and admire. She will be forever missed. Join us next time for another episode of The Last 24. Until then, take care out there, folks.